Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a narrow, rain-slick alley where the cobblestones shine under a flickering torch. The air smells of damp wool, rotting cabbage, and something you really hope is just mud. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls, muffled by the fog curling between crooked buildings. You're about to meet the so-called Brotherhood of Medieval Assassins, and if you've been picturing sleek, mysterious figures with flawless skills, you're in for a surprise. The truth is, you probably won't survive this. Not because of enemy blades, but because of cold, hunger and boots that have a personal vendetta against your toes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are right now, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the entrance to a crooked alley, barely wide enough for two people to pass. The walls on either side loom high and lean inward like they're conspiring to block out the moonlight. Somewhere overhead, laundry drips rainwater onto your hood. Scratch that, onto your head, because the guild hasn't issued you a hood yet. You shuffle forward, feeling the uneven stones shift under your worn soles, and think to yourself, this is how legends begin. The first door you find isn't grand or ominous. It's just a warped plank of wood with a knotted rope for a handle. You knock, and the sound is swallowed instantly by the damp. The door opens a crack, revealing one pale eye and a voice that could slice bread. You late. You're not sure how you could be late when you didn't know the meeting time, but apparently assassins don't operate on polite explanation. Inside, the guild hall is less of a hall and more of a cramped storeroom smelling faintly of onions and oil. There are no flickering candelabras, no polished weapons on the wall, just a rickety table where three figures sit hunched over bowls of something grey and steaming. One of them gestures for you to sit, but the only empty stool wobbles like it's been cursed. You try to take in the details. One man has a crooked nose that looks like it's been broken more times than he's changed shirts. Another chews with the slow determination of someone who doesn't have all their teeth. The third is cleaning his fingernails with a small blade that, if you're honest, you wouldn't trust to cut cheese. This is your welcome. No fanfare, no oath yet, just a quick reminder from the leader that out here, no one cares about your name. In fact, they'd rather not know it. Names make things complicated if one of you ends up dangling from the city gate by sunrise. A historical fact slips into your thoughts. While assassin guilds are romanticized now, in many medieval towns they were less formal organizations and more loose networks of freelancers. You didn't join so much as get absorbed. If you survived your first few jobs you were in. If not, well, historians still argue whether failures were quietly buried or simply abandoned in the gutter. As you sit there, damp and uncertain, someone slides a mug toward you. The drink is lukewarm ale, sour enough to make your lips curl. You take a sip to be polite, and immediately regret every decision that's led you to this moment. One of the older members smirks, as if watching you gag is part of your initiation. Then comes the orientation, if you can call it that. It's delivered in short, sharp commands. Don't get caught, don't get recognized, don't come back if you've been followed. If you need help, don't ask for it. If you hear the code phrase "the cart is late," it means scatter immediately. And perhaps most importantly, if the guild decides you've become a liability, you'll vanish faster than a rabbit in a hawk's shadow. You glance at the cracked door, and wonder how many people have walked through it thinking they were about to join something powerful, only to find themselves just another expendable shadow in the fog. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters, and carrying the faint toll of midnight. The leader leans closer, his breath smelling faintly of garlic, and worse. First job's tomorrow, he says, be ready. You nod, though your stomach knots, not from fear of killing, but from the certainty that you'll be expected to do it in weather that already feels like it's seeping into your bones. One of the others chuckles and adds, bring your own boots. We don't loan those out. You don't yet understand why that's a warning, but you will. Oh, you will. The meeting ends abruptly. No warm goodbyes, no handshake. Just a muttered shut the door on your way out. You step back into the alley, where the rain has intensified into something that could strip paint off a cart. Your cloak, thin, borrowed, and not remotely waterproof, sticks to your shoulders like cold bread dough. You pull it tighter, but the wind laughs at you and finds every gap. On the walk back to wherever you'll sleep tonight, probably under that half-collapsed awning by the tannery, you notice something unsettling. The streets are empty, yet you feel watched. The guild's eyes, the city watch, or maybe just the alley cats with expressions that say rookie. By the time you curl up in your corner, shivering and wondering if joining this brotherhood was a mistake. You've already learned your first real lesson. The danger isn't just in the blade, it's in every cold, wet, hungry moment between the blade and your bed. Morning comes too early, if it comes at all, in these narrow streets where sunlight struggles to crawl between leaning rooftops. You wake to the smell of damp hay and smoke from someone's breakfast fire, though the breakfast itself is nowhere in sight for you. Your corner under the tannery awning is stiff with frost, and your fingers feel like they belong to someone else. Welcome to your first full day as an assassin in training. Spoiler, there's no parade. You make your way back to the guild's hidden door, following the same crooked alley from last night. This time you notice how the cobblestones slope just enough to funnel the rainwater toward your boots, an architectural design that feels personally spiteful. The door creaks open before you can knock, and the leader gestures you inside without a word. He's the kind of man whose silence feels heavier than an argument. The ceremony, if you can call it that, is shockingly brief. A small dagger is placed on the table in front of you, not polished, not engraved, just a working tool with a grip worn smooth by other hands. You're told to take it in your right hand, cut the palm of your left, and smear the blood on the dagger's hilt. This is your oath, binding you to the guild. The cut stings, but not as much as the thought that the blade was probably just used to peel an onion. As you repeat the words they feed you, low, sharp syllables that sound like they were lifted from an old tavern song, you realize you're swearing more than loyalty. You're promising silence, obedience, and if it comes to it, your life. Historians still argue whether such oaths were taken seriously, or were just dramatic gestures to intimidate newcomers. But here in this dim room, with 3 pairs of eyes locked on you, it feels binding enough to squeeze the breath from your lungs. The leader seals it with a nod and a half-smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Now you're one of us, he says, which is less comforting than you'd hoped. He then launches into the rules, rattling them off like a man who's given this speech too many times. Rule 1, never speak of the guild outside these walls. Rule 2, never harm another member, unless ordered. Rule 3, when given a task, complete it, even if it costs you everything. The last one sticks with you. Everything is a broad category, and you have the uncomfortable sense that they've all tested its limits. You're assigned a mentor, though mentor might be too generous a word. His name is Kaz, and he's missing 2 fingers on his left hand, a detail you try not to think about. Kaz takes you outside, where the fog hasn't lifted, and leads you through the winding streets. First rule of survival, he says in a voice like gravel, is knowing when not to be seen. It turns out that means avoiding the main roads, ducking into alleys you'd normally cross the street to avoid, and blending into market crowds without actually buying anything. This is harder than it sounds. You discover quickly that you don't walk like a local. Your stride is too quick, your eyes linger on people too long, your shoulders don't slouch quite enough. To fix this, Kaz orders you to mimic him. You match his steps, his pauses, even the way he scratches his ear at random intervals. You feel ridiculous, like a street mime without an audience, but he assures you this is what keeps you alive. At one point you pass a group of fishmongers unloading their catch. The smell hits you like a slap, and you instinctively wrinkle your nose. Kaz catches it. Lose that face, he says. You smell worse. He's not wrong. You haven't bathed since before the oath, and probably won't again anytime soon. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces in many medieval cities. Public bathhouses were outlawed during plague years, supposedly to prevent disease, but also because they turned into social hubs for gossip, gambling and less wholesome activities. Assassins, it turns out, weren't exactly welcome in them even in calmer times. Midway through your walk, Kaz tests your loyalty. He points to a man in a green tunic, carrying a basket of bread. Follow him, he says, but don't let him see you. You trail the man for what feels like forever, ducking behind barrels and pretending to examine turnips whenever he turns. Your heart races the entire time, not because you fear the man, but because you know Kaz is watching your every mistake. When you finally circle back to the guild, Kaz shrugs. You lasted longer than the last one, he says. You're not sure if that's praise or a warning. Back inside, the leader calls you over. You understand now, he says quietly, that we own your shadow. Where you go, it goes. Where it goes, we're there too. His words sink in like cold rain, and you realize this oath isn't just about action, it's about identity. You're not a free person anymore. You belong to a network that sees you as a tool, and tools don't get to decide how they're used. By nightfall, your head aches from the new rules, the new gate, the constant sense of being evaluated. You step back into the street, the same crooked alley as always, but it feels narrower now, like the walls are pressing in to remind you of your new boundaries. Somewhere above, a shutter bangs in the wind, and you wonder if that sound will always make you look over your shoulder now. Your training begins before dawn, which would be tolerable if dawn didn't arrive with the temperature of a forgotten ice cellar. You're shaken awake by Kaz's boot nudging your side. He's clearly not a good morning kind of man. Up, he says, tossing you a length of rope. We start with climbing. You trail him to the edge of the city, where the half-collapsed remains of an old watchtower lean against the sky like it's drunk. The stones are slick with frost, and the rope in your hand feels stiff, its fibers rough enough to peel the skin from your palms. Kazes points to the top. Get there, he says, and don't die. He delivers it so casually, you wonder if someone has died doing this. Your fingers burn as you haul yourself up, the rope swaying with each pull. The wind catches your cloak and turns it into a sail that works entirely against you. By the time you reach the halfway mark, your arms feel like boiled noodles. Somewhere below, Kaz calls. If you fall, roll when you hit. Might save your neck. His voice makes it sound like he's not betting on you making it. Climbing isn't the only torture. After the tower, you're thrown into balance drills on a narrow plank set across 2 barrels. You shuffle back and forth while Kaz occasionally tosses pebbles at your knees to keep you alert. The plank wobbles under your weight, and each slip sends your stomach into your boots. You'd laugh if you weren't busy imagining the headline. Local assassin candidate breaks neck before first job. The rest of the morning is weapons training, or more accurately, endurance training disguised as weapons training. You're given a wooden dagger for sparring, which seems insulting until you feel how heavy it is after an hour of swinging. Your wrists ache, your shoulders throb, and your breath puffs out in ragged clouds. Kaz doesn't offer water until you've already contemplated drinking the frost off your sleeve. A bit of historical truth here. Despite popular belief, assassins didn't always train with exotic specialized weapons. More often they practiced with whatever the local blacksmith could make cheaply, or whatever could be disguised as a tool. Knives used for carving bread could just as easily be used for carving something less pleasant. Historians still argue whether this practicality was a sign of cleverness or desperation. By midday, your stomach is growling loud enough to scare the pigeons. Lunch is a crust of bread so hard you could use it as a shield. Kaz tears his in half with his teeth, then hands you a flask of something that smells faintly like vinegar. Drink, he says. You do, and immediately regret it. It's watered-down wine, the kind that tastes like it's been stored in a barrel alongside someone's laundry. The afternoon is for stealth drills. Kaz leads you to the market, where the goal is to lift a coin from an unsuspecting merchant's table without being caught. You fail spectacularly. The first merchant slaps your hand away before you're even close, muttering something about clumsy urchins. The second ignores you entirely, which would feel like a victory if you'd actually managed to take anything. By the third, you're considering whether starving might be less humiliating. It's during these drills that you pick up your first quirky tidbit from guild life. Apparently the market geese are deadlier than the watch. One flaps at you so aggressively you nearly fall into a basket of onions. Kaz is laughing so hard he has to lean against a wall. Geese don't forget faces, he tells you, which you desperately hope is a joke. Spoiler, it's not. By the time the sun starts to set, every muscle in your body is screaming for mercy. You trudge back to the guild, sweat freezing against your skin. Inside, the warmth of the room is almost worse. It makes the aches settle deeper into your bones. The leader is there, carving something small with a knife. He doesn't look up as he says, "Training's harder than the work." You wonder if that's supposed to be reassuring, because it feels like a warning. That night, as you curl up in your drafty corner, you can still feel the rope burns on your palms and the wobble of the plank under your feet. You drift into a shallow sleep with the faint hope that tomorrow might be easier, but deep down you know it won't be. Morning greets you with the smell of damp leather and burnt porridge. Someone in the guild has attempted breakfast, and the results are both undercooked and overcooked in the same bowl. You choke it down anyway because Kaz is already motioning you toward the door. "Weapon care," he says, handing you a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside is your arsenal. 2 short daggers with spots of rust, a bow that looks older than you, and a quiver of arrows with mismatched fletching. The bowstring sags like it's contemplating retirement. You're told that a weapon you don't maintain is worse than no weapon at all, which feels philosophical until you realize they mean it literally. Your day becomes an endless cycle of scraping rust, oiling blades, and testing edges. The oil smells sharp and earthy, seeping into your hands until it seems permanent. Every few minutes, Kaz checks your progress and mutters, not sharp enough, before handing it back. After the fifth time, you start to suspect this is less about the weapon and more about testing your patience. A historical fact drifts into your mind. Iron and steel in the medieval period weren't mass-produced to modern consistency, so even the best blades required constant upkeep. Moisture from your own sweat could ruin a weapon in days. Historians still argue whether assassins of the time preferred lighter, quicker blades for stealth, or heavier ones for durability. Standing here, you decide the real answer was whatever didn't break in your hand. The bow is even more frustrating. The string frays under your fingers, and you're taught to twist fibers from animal sinew to reinforce it. The process is slow, sticky, and makes you wish you'd taken up something easier, like knitting. Though come to think of it, knitting needles could probably double as weapons around here. By midday, you're allowed to test your work. The target is a sack of straw in the guild's courtyard, swaying slightly in the breeze. Your first arrow sails wide, embedding itself in the wooden fence. The second bounces off the straw entirely. Kaz sighs like he's aged 5 years just watching you. Good thing you're not a soldier, he says. You bite back the urge to point out that soldiers get food, pay, and boots without holes. After the archery comes throwing practice. The goal: land a dagger in a wooden post from 10 paces. Your first throw lands point down, but in the dirt. The second actually hits the post but bounces off, clattering to the ground. Kaz demonstrates by sinking his blade deep into the wood with a single motion. Again, he says, and again, and again, and again, until your arm feels like it's been replaced with a lead pipe. In between drills, you're lectured on the invisibility of weapons. A sword on your back screams soldier, a knife hidden in a boot whispers assassin. You're shown how to wrap blades in cloth to muffle the sound, how to tie a bow so it sits flat against your body, and how to disassemble a crossbow quickly in case you need to dump it mid-escape. Oh! One quirky tidbit you pick up. Some guild members carry deliberately dull knives, not for fighting, but for prying open shutters, cutting rope or scraping resin off barrels. Tools, not trophies. You find yourself oddly more comfortable with one of these than with your newly sharpened dagger. Late in the day, your frustration peaks when one of the arrows you've just painstakingly repaired splinters on impact. You want to curse, but instead you just stare at the broken shaft, feeling like it's a metaphor for your entire apprenticeship. Kaz pats your shoulder, not kindly, exactly, but in a way that says he recognizes the expression. This part, he says, never gets easier, you just get better at pretending it's fine. By the time you return the weapons to their bundle, your hands are slick with oil and your arms feel like they belong to someone else. You curl up that night listening to the faint drip of water somewhere in the dark, wondering if the sound is rain or just your patience wearing thin. You start the day believing briefly that today might be easier. Then Kaz tosses you a heavy wool cloak and says, "Blend in." That's it. No explanation, no plan. Just 2 words and a gesture toward the city's busiest district. You throw the cloak over your shoulders, and instantly it feels like you've strapped a wet sheep to your back. It smells faintly of mildew, and something sharper, like onions left too long in the sun. You pull the hood up, thinking it'll at least hide your face. But the moment you step outside, you realize the truth. Cloaks don't make you invisible. They make you look suspiciously like someone trying to be invisible. The market is already alive with the sound of shouting merchants and clattering cart wheels. Stalls overflow with bolts of dyed fabric, heaps of root vegetables, and barrels of salted fish. Your job is to move through this chaos without drawing attention, which is tricky when the cloak keeps snagging on crates and brushing against people like an overeager dog. Almost immediately, a baker's apprentice bumps into you, muttering something about clumsy strangers. You mumble an apology, and sidestep into the crowd, trying to match the rhythm of the people around you. But the hood narrows your vision, and you nearly collide with a woman balancing a basket of apples on her head. She glares, and you realize your first mistake. In a place where everyone knows everyone, a hooded stranger sticks out like a splinter in bread dough. Historical reality check. In medieval towns, people didn't wear cloaks indoors or in busy markets unless it was freezing or raining. A hooded figure moving through a sunny square would have looked suspicious enough to earn a second glance from the local watch. Historians still argue whether assassins adapted by wearing everyday clothing or by embracing the suspicion to intimidate their marks. Standing here, sweating under your wool, you suspect it was the former. Kaz, of course, is nowhere in sight, but you know he's watching. The goal isn't to move unseen, it's to move unnoticed. This means stopping occasionally to glance at goods you have no intention of buying, exchanging brief nods with strangers, and most importantly, never looking like you have a destination. You try leaning casually on a fishmonger's cart, only for the fishmonger to swat at you with a gutted herring. You duck away, the cloak's hem trailing through something on the ground you don't want to identify. In another stall, you feign interest in a string of onions, but the seller launches into a pitch so fast you can't politely escape without buying one. You end up with an onion. By midday, the cloak has become a sauna, and your shirt is damp with sweat. You spot a small alley and slip inside for relief, only to find two stray dogs tearing into a pile of discarded bones. One growls at you, the other sniffs your cloak, and you realize the smell of fish guts from earlier has made you their new best friend. You retreat quickly. One quirky tidbit you notice during the day: the most invisible people aren't the ones in dull clothing, they're the ones carrying something ordinary, like a basket of bread or a bucket of water. People glance at the object, not the face, so you clutch your newly acquired onion like it's a prized possession, and sure enough, the glares and muttered suspicions fade. Your trial ends when Kaz materializes from the crowd, onion in hand. "Not bad," he says, though you can't tell if he means it or if he's mocking you. He returns the onion to you with a smirk. "Dinner," he says, and walks away. Back at your corner of the guild, you sit with the onion in your lap, wondering if all this effort was worth the single nod of approval. But you have learned something. Invisibility isn't about the cloak, it's about looking like you belong, and unfortunately, smelling like you belong too. The first step out of bed is a mistake, because your boots remind you, instantly and without mercy, that they hate you. They're stiff from drying by the hearth overnight, which means the leather now feels like it's been carved from frozen wood. You slide your feet in, and every seam seems to dig in somewhere new. Kaz notices you limping as you join him in the alley. "Those the only boots you've got?" he asks, though you can tell from his smirk he already knows the answer. In the guild, footwear is your own problem. They'll train you to climb walls and blend in with the crowd, but they won't spare a coin for decent soles. Today's training involves walking, lots of it. Long meandering routes through muddy lanes, cobbled streets and ankle-deep puddles. Your boots, never truly waterproof to begin with, surrender within minutes. Cold water seeps in, soaking your socks until each step feels like squelching in rotten fruit. You grit your teeth and keep moving. A historical note comes to mind. Medieval boots were often little more than stitched leather wraps, designed for quick repairs rather than comfort. Thick soles were rare and expensive, and most working people wore thin ones that didn't last a season. Historians still argue whether assassins favored softer soles for stealth, or just took whatever they could scavenge. Right now your guess is whichever didn't actively chew their feet. By the time you've circled the city's outer wall, blisters are forming on both heels. Kaz's been deliberately picking the roughest routes, narrow passages littered with rubble, stairs so steep they feel like climbing ladders, and wooden bridges that bow alarmingly under your weight. Your feet throb with every change in surface. At one point, he leads you through the tannery district, where runoff from the dye vats turns the puddles unnatural colors. You step into one that's a murky green, and immediately regret it. The smell clings to the leather, sharp and sour. A dog sniffs your boot and sneezes. A quirky tip you overhear from another guild member: sprinkling ash into your boots helps absorb moisture and smell. It's better than nothing, but also means your socks will look like you've been wading through chimney soot. You make a mental note to try it later, assuming your socks survive the day. Halfway through the training, Kaz decides to test your sprint. He points to a row of posts along the waterfront. "Run it," he says. You launch forward, the cold water in your boots sloshing with every step. The blisters protest immediately, sharp as needles. By the time you reach the last post, you're gasping and wincing in equal measure. Kaz doesn't bother to hide his amusement. "Your feet'll toughen," he says, "or you'll stop feeling them altogether." Neither option sounds great, but you keep walking when he turns toward the city center. By the time you get back to the guild, your boots are twice as heavy from absorbed water and grime. You peel them off and find the beginnings of raw skin where the leather rubbed too much. No one offers sympathy, just a reminder that your first real job might require running over rooftops in worse conditions. That night, you place the boots near the hearth again, knowing tomorrow they'll be just as stiff, just as unkind. You consider sleeping without them entirely, but in the guild, unattended possessions have a way of vanishing, and barefoot, you wouldn't last an hour in this city. By now you've accepted that guild life means eating like a stray cat, quickly, quietly, and never quite enough. This morning's meal is a single hunk of stale bread, and a wedge of hard cheese so small it could vanish if you sneezed. You gnaw at it while Kaz explains today's focus, keeping your belly from making you a target. That sounds noble until you realize it means finding food without announcing your presence anywhere for long. Assassins, he says, never linger in one place unless they want to be remembered. In a city where gossip spreads faster than fire on a thatched roof, being remembered is dangerous. Your first stop is a cramped tavern tucked between two leaning buildings. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of ale, wood smoke, and something fried in questionable oil. The place is dim, the only light coming from a small hearth where a pot simmers. You slide into a shadowy corner, pull your hood forward, and wait. The tavern keeper gives you a look that says buy something or leave. You order the cheapest thing, thin broth with a floating scrap of carrot, and nurse it like it's a full feast. It's warm, which is a blessing, but it's gone in 3 spoonfuls. You're careful not to meet anyone's eyes because in here, even a polite glance can lead to a conversation you can't afford. A historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Many medieval inns and taverns doubled as unofficial message hubs. Travelers carried news from far-off towns and locals gathered for stories as much as for food. Historians still argue whether assassins used these places for intelligence gathering or avoided them entirely to stay off the radar. Watching the chatter around you, you can see the risk in both. Kaz meets you outside and takes you to the market, where the tactic shifts: buy a small item here, a scrap there, so no one merchant remembers your face. You pick up a bruised apple from one stall, a slice of smoked fish from another, and because you still have that cursed onion from before, a bit of coarse salt from a third. It's not exactly a meal, but pieced together, it keeps you going. Of course, stealth eating isn't without hazards. While leaning against a wall to eat your apple, you feel a tap on your shoulder. You turn to find a boy of about 10, eyes fixed on the fruit. Without a word, he points to his mouth. You hesitate, then hand it over. He bolts before you can say anything, but not before Kaz mutters, "There goes half your lunch." The rest of the day is a lesson in speed. In one alley, you're handed a hot meat pie from a street vendor, but Kaz makes you walk away while eating it, weaving through foot traffic without dropping so much as a crumb. You nearly choke twice, and the last bite burns your tongue. Kaz just smirks, a quirky tidbit from the guild: if you must eat in public, eat standing and moving. It signals you're busy, not loitering. Sitting draws the wrong kind of attention. You start to notice how many others in the crowd follow this habit, and you realize they might be more like you than they appear. By evening you've eaten enough to keep the edge off your hunger, but you never once felt full. That, Kaz explains, is the point. A full belly slows you down, makes you lazy. Better to stay just a little hungry, alert, sharp. You're not entirely convinced, especially as you drift to sleep with the smell of roasted chicken wafting in from somewhere nearby. Morning comes without fanfare. No sunrise over marble rooftops. No gentle wake-up. Instead, you're roused by the hollow clang of the guild's water bucket hitting the cobblestones. Someone just dumped it outside, which means 2 things. The night watch is over, and it's your turn to scrub up. The guild doesn't have baths. It has a cracked wooden basin in a corner, fed by water that's been sitting in the bucket since yesterday. It smells faintly of metal and algae. You dunk your hands and splash your face, but it's not enough to chase away the grime clinging to your skin. The truth is, assassins don't get to be clean, not in the romanticized perfumed scents ballads suggest. Here's the medieval reality. Bathing was rare for most people. Public bathhouses existed in some cities, but they were expensive, crowded, and often associated with other, less reputable activities. For a guild member, walking into one was an invitation for someone to remember your face and report it later. That's why most assassins relied on partial washes: hands, face, neck, armpits. Anything else was a luxury. Kaz tosses you a scrap of cloth and a small pouch of lye soap, warning you it'll sting like a knife if it gets in your eyes. You scrub at your wrists and behind your ears, but the faint smell of smoke, sweat, and last night's market lingers. The guild's leather jerkins hold scents like secrets. They never really let go. It's worse in summer. Sweat collects under your hood, turning the inside into a damp, salty cave. In winter, the problem is the opposite. Layers trap the stale smell of your own breath and body heat, so when you finally pull off the hood indoors, you release a wave of odor strong enough to make even seasoned guild members lean away. There's also the matter of boots. Medieval boots weren't designed for comfort or ventilation. After a day of slogging through muddy streets and treading over fish guts in the docks, They smell like something that could be used in a siege. Kaz says the only solution is stuffing them with dried mint or rosemary overnight, if you can spare the coin. A historical note you wish you didn't know. Some medieval cities had so much waste in the streets that it was said you could smell the town before you saw its walls. That same filth clings to anyone who walks those streets daily, especially those of you who spend time hiding in alleys, crouching behind barrels, or crawling under low bridges. The stink becomes a shadow you can't shake. After your half-hearted wash, you join the others in the courtyard. A few of them smell faintly of wood ash, a trick they say works to mask body odor. Others have tried rubbing themselves with strong herbs or oil, but oil makes your grip on a dagger slippery, so you're told to skip it. You think about the ballads again, the ones where assassins are shadowy, mysterious figures who melt into the crowd. What the songs don't say is that the crowd smells just as bad as you do. That's the only reason your scent doesn't betray you immediately. By mid-morning, you've stopped noticing it, but deep down you know anyone who's ever been close to you could follow your trail without seeing you at all. In a life built on being invisible, that's an uncomfortable thought. By the time you've shaken off the morning stiffness and the smell, it's time for the part of the job no one talks about in the romantic tavern stories waiting. If you picture medieval assassination as a string of daring rooftop chases and split-second kills, you've been lied to. Most of the work is standing still, watching, and trying not to yawn in a place where yawning could get you noticed. Today's target is a merchant who owns half the spice stalls in the East Market. The guild doesn't tell you why he's marked, only that someone paid for it. Your job is simple in theory. Follow him, learn his habits, wait for the right moment. In practice, it's exhausting. You've been standing by a cart of dried figs for 2 hours, pretending to compare prices. Your eyes track the merchant as he argues over a shipment of saffron, waves his arms wildly, and occasionally dips into the pouch on his belt to pay porters. He's always surrounded by people, buyers, assistants, guards. This is the first big lesson in the trade. Important targets rarely walk alone. Even when they look unguarded, there's always someone nearby watching their back. You once heard an older assassin joke, "It's easier to kill a drunk baron in his bed than a sober merchant in the market." Your boots are aching again, and the smell of cumin and garlic from a nearby stall is making your empty stomach knot. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, trying not to draw attention. Every minute, you remind yourself not to stare too hard at the merchant's face. Hold eye contact too long, and someone will remember you. In medieval times, blending in meant really blending in. There were no sunglasses to hide behind, no mobile phones to look down at. You had to act like you belonged, chatting idly with vendors, tasting a fig, even buying something you didn't need just to look the part. All of it ate into your meager coin supply. Hours pass. The merchant finally begins moving toward his warehouse, his guards fanning out to clear the way. You follow at a distance, careful not to step in the same muddy tracks twice. The street narrows ahead, a perfect choke point, but then he stops, steps into a side door, and vanishes into a crowd of porters hauling crates. You curse under your breath. Another lost chance. This is the second big lesson. Most days, nothing happens. You'll spend hours tracking someone only to have the opportunity slip away because of a locked gate, a stray dog, or just bad timing. That's why the guild always has more than one assassin watching a target, and why you, the newest recruit, usually get the least glamorous position, the one where you freeze in the shadows while someone else takes the kill. Still you stay, because the waiting is part of the work, and if you leave early, you might miss the one mistake your target makes all day. The next day begins the same way. Stiff joints, stale bread for breakfast, and that sinking feeling that you're about to waste another 12 hours staring at someone's back. You're on a new assignment now, one the guild says is simpler. That word should comfort you, but instead it makes you suspicious. In assassin speak, simpler usually means equally dangerous, but with fewer details in the briefing. Your target is a minor court scribe accused of leaking sensitive documents to a rival lord. Historians still argue whether the medieval courts were genuinely paranoid or just enjoyed executing people for fun, but in your experience, either reason is enough to get someone killed. The scribe's routine is painfully dull. Wake, write, eat, write more, drink a single cup of thin ale, then sleep. It's not glamorous, but at least you don't have to tail him through a chaotic market. Instead you lurk in the corridor outside his workroom, blending in with the servants. You think it'll be easy. Slip in while he's fetching ink, push him out a high window, done. But medieval castles are tricky. The windows are narrow, the walls thick, and every corridor seems to echo with footsteps that may or may not be heading your way. There's also the matter of medieval superstition. The servants cross themselves whenever they pass a certain tapestry, claiming it holds watching eyes. You roll yours at the idea, until you notice a guard always stationed nearby. It's not magic, it's security. You bide your time, pretending to help carry a chest of wax tablets, feeling your arms ache as you shuffle past the scribe's door. A whisper from the guild echoes in your head. If you can't kill clean, don't kill at all. That's the third big lesson. Botched jobs bring more trouble than they're worth. By nightfall, the scribe is still alive. You're still waiting, and you're beginning to think that the most dangerous thing in this profession isn't the dagger, it's the boredom. You've been staring at the same torchlit stone wall for so long, that the flicker of light is starting to look like it's trying to wink at you. The scribe is still working, bent over his desk, like his spine has been permanently shaped into a question mark. Patience, you remind yourself, is the fourth big lesson of this miserable profession. Patience and silence. You can't pace the corridor, that would draw attention. You can't chat with the servants, they might remember your face later. So you stand still, shifting your weight every so often, to keep your legs from locking up, feeling like a decorative statue no one ordered. It's only when the scribe finally gets up to fetch a candle that you move. You slide inside, soft as a shadow. His parchments are spread everywhere, drafts of letters, some so riddled with ink blots, they look like they've been attacked by a squid. One sheet catches your eye. It's not a letter, it's a rough map, and in the margin, a tiny symbol you recognize from guild training, the mark for safe route. Now your curiosity is awake, and that's dangerous. Historians still argue whether medieval scribes occasionally doubled as spies, but right now, you're looking at evidence that suggests this one does. Killing him might not just remove a leaky pen, it could disrupt a larger network. You hear footsteps returning, so you melt back into the hall. The rest of the night, your mind won't quiet. The guild gave you a name, but no context, and context, you realize, might be the difference between a clean kill and a political disaster. The temptation is strong to just follow orders and end it tomorrow, but your instincts, sharpened by too many bad nights, whisper otherwise. The wall torch flickers again, and you decide it's not winking, it's warning. Morning comes, though you're not sure you actually slept. Your bed in the inn was little more than a lumpy bag of straw that smelled faintly of goat, and every time someone walked past your door, the loose floorboards squeaked like an accusation. You head out before the rest of the town is awake, slipping through side alleys until you find the scribe's little workshop again. The streets are still damp from last night's rain, and the air has that sharp, metallic chill that makes your fingers ache. Somewhere, a baker is already at work. You can smell bread, but you don't dare stop. Instead, you lean in the shadow of a crumbling wall and wait for him to leave. You've decided to tail him, see where this so-called safe route leads. And here's the thing about tailing someone in medieval Europe. There's no convenient crowd to blend into at this hour, and horses are way too conspicuous unless you want everyone to remember that one rider who was following the scribe. So it's just you, walking slow, eyes on anything but your target, pretending you're deeply fascinated by the crooked timber beams overhead. He heads to the lower market district, but not to buy supplies. Instead, he ducks into a tanner's shop. That's odd. Scribes rarely need animal hides themselves. They work with prepared parchment. You wait outside, counting your breaths until he emerges with a rolled bundle under his arm. Now your mind is spinning. Is it a message, a payoff, or more concerning, evidence that he's tied to someone with connections in multiple trades? Historians still argue whether such cross-guild dealings were common or rare, but in your line of work, rare just means harder to predict. You're about to follow him further when a hand grabs your sleeve. Not hard, just enough to stop you. A voice, low and amused, says, "You've been shadowing him since sunrise. Care to explain?" You turn, already calculating how fast you can get to your knife. You size up the stranger, without turning your head too much. He's taller than you by a hand's breadth, wearing a hood that hides most of his face, and his grip on your sleeve is relaxed, as if he's sure you won't run. That's either confidence or stupidity, and you're not yet sure which. "I'm just taking a walk," you murmur. The universal medieval code for mind your own business. He doesn't let go. Instead, he tilts his head toward the tanner's shop, where the scribe has already disappeared into the maze of streets beyond. "Walks usually go in more than one direction," he says, his tone carrying the kind of calm that means I've already decided how this conversation ends. You realize something unsettling. He's not armed, at least not visibly, and yet you can't shake the sense he doesn't need to be. It's that look in his eyes, sharp but lazy, like a cat that's already figured out which mouse hole you'll try next. Finally he releases your sleeve, but only to step around you and start walking in the same direction as the scribe. You can follow, he says, over his shoulder, or you can go back to wherever it is you keep your head down, but if you follow, you're in it now, no half measures. Historians still argue whether such chance meetings were staged in medieval intelligence circles or truly accidental, but you have your suspicions. You follow, because the alternative is to walk away and spend the rest of the week wondering what you just missed. The street's narrow, hemmed in by leaning houses so close their rooftops nearly kiss. The stranger leads you into a courtyard, with a dry fountain in the center. It's here that he stops, finally facing you fully. You're after the wrong man, he says quietly. And if you keep at it, you'll end up exactly where they want you, alone, confused and conveniently dead. There's no smile now, just a long heavy pause that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You stare at him, your mind juggling questions like a street performer with too many torches. And who, you ask slowly, is they? He takes a seat on the cracked stone rim of the dry fountain, as though this is just another casual marketplace chat. The people who sent you chasing ghosts. The ones who want your attention on the scribe so you won't see the bigger thing moving in the shadows. A breeze slides into the courtyard, carrying the smell of yesterday's fish market and the faint tang of iron. Somewhere nearby, a door creaks on its hinges, and you can't tell if it's just the wind or a listener adjusting their ear. He leans forward, elbows on knees. Assassins like you, he doesn't bother dressing it up. You're pawns. You think your piece is on the board, but you're just the board itself. Something to be played on until the wood splinters. It's not comforting, and you wish you could argue, but deep down you've had that suspicion ever since you took the job. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins acted as independent agents or were always tied, knowingly or not, to broader political games. The evidence is murky, and in moments like this you see why. Let me guess, you say, you're offering me a way out. Not out, he replies. Sideways, and that's even stranger, because sideways isn't an option you've ever considered. Forward means taking the scribe, backward means walking away. Sideways. What does sideways even look like? He explains it like he's talking to someone slow. Sideways means you deliver something they aren't expecting to someone they don't control. It means you vanish from their board, but not from the game entirely. Your pulse picks up. This sounds less like survival, and more like doubling the risk. And if I refuse? He shrugs, stands and begins walking toward a shadowed archway at the far end of the courtyard. Then you'll wake up one morning and find your knife already in your own ribs. Figuratively, if you're lucky, literally, if you're not. You wait a beat before following, because luck has never been your strongest ally anyway. You follow him through the archway, your footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. The air here is cooler, damp, smelling faintly of wet stone and old paper, as if the walls themselves are lined with forgotten scrolls. At the end of the corridor, a small door waits, its surface scarred with knife marks, some deliberate, some the kind that happen when people arrive in a hurry they never leave from. He pushes it open, revealing a cramped chamber lit only by the greenish glow of a single oil lamp. Inside, a table is strewn with maps, some ink still glistening as if the cartographer has just stepped out for tea. You glance at one in particular, an intricate diagram of the city, dotted with tiny wax seals marking rooftops, alleys, and meeting spots. This, he says, pointing at a symbol near the riverfront, is your sideways. You squint. That's just a dock. It's a dock now, but tomorrow night, it will be a bargaining table, the kind no one admits exists. And you, he gives you that flat look again, are going to be the unexpected guest. The plan, if you can call it that, unspools in his low, measured voice. You'll take nothing from the scribe. You'll deliver nothing to the usual handlers. Instead, you'll place a small sealed package, a thing you're not allowed to open, into the hands of someone who shouldn't even know your name. And in doing so, you'll light a fuse that will burn quietly for weeks before anyone even notices the smoke. It's bold. It's reckless. It's, let's be honest, probably going to get you killed. Historians still argue whether medieval political disruptions like this ever actually worked, or if they simply created new enemies faster than they removed old ones. But here's the thing, for the first time in weeks, you feel awake, not just alert, but alive in the way you did before you learned how heavy your own shadow could be. Fine, you say, taking the small cloth-wrapped package he pulls from under the table. Sideways it is. He nods, as though he always knew you'd say that, and maybe he did. The walk back through the sleeping city is different this time. The cobblestones don't feel as heavy under your boots. The night air, though cold, has a bite that keeps you sharp. Somewhere in the distance a cat yowls at something unseen, and you imagine it's warning you, or cheering you on. Hard to tell. By the time you reach the edge of the river, the first hints of dawn have begun to pale the sky. The water laps quietly against the wooden pilings, whispering secrets you'll never quite catch. You tuck the package into your coat, settle into the shadows, and wait for tomorrow to come. Because Sideways doesn't happen in one step, it happens in the long, patient stretch between now and the moment the fuse finally reaches the powder. And when it does, you'll be somewhere else entirely, watching from a safe distance if the gods are kind. Now, you let the scene soften in your mind. The river fades into a gentle murmur, its ripples no longer tied to urgency but to the slow, timeless motion of water meeting shore. You feel the weight of the package in your coat pocket lighten, as though it too understands that, for tonight, there is nothing more to be done. The streets around you quiet completely, their cobbles empty under the pale wash of early morning. You imagine shutters closing, footsteps retreating, and the faint clink of a distant bell marking the change of watch. Somewhere, a baker stirs the first embers of the day's fire, the faint scent of warm bread drifting through the chill air. You step back from the water, finding a spot to sit where the sun will soon reach you. The fabric of your coat holds the night's coolness, but underneath your muscles loosen, your heartbeat slows. In this stillness, you are no longer an assassin, nor a pawn, nor even a piece of the game. You are simply a quiet observer in a world that, for the moment, has paused its plotting. Let that stillness stretch. Feel it in your shoulders, in your jaw, in the slow breath you take and release. The story can wait. The city can wait. Even the Sideways path can pause here, just long enough for you to drift into the safe, slow rhythm of rest. And as the sun finally crests the rooftops, spilling light over the quiet dock, you let yourself fade with it, carried away, not by urgency or danger, but by the gentle tide of sleep.